you're going to waste this year. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack ambition. You'll waste it because you've confused thinking about change with actually changing. You've mistaken planning for progress. And you've built an entire identity around preparing to start instead of starting. Here's what that looks like in practice. You spend Sunday night mapping out your week. You feel organized. Monday morning, you wake up with intention. By Monday afternoon, something comes up. By Tuesday, you're already negotiating with yourself about Wednesday. By Friday, you're telling yourself next week will be different. And it never is. This isn't a motivation problem. This is a structural problem. And until you understand the mechanics of why people fail to follow through, you'll keep repeating the same pattern with better excuses. Let me tell you what's actually happening. There's a gap between what you say you'll do and what you actually do. Most people spend their entire lives trying to close that gap with willpower. They think if they just want it bad enough, if they just feel motivated enough, if they just find the right system, they'll finally execute. They won't. Because the gap isn't closed with emotion. It's closed with architecture. It's closed by removing the conditions that allow you to bail. It's closed by making follow-through easier than retreat. And most people never do this because they're still operating under the assumption that commitment is a feeling you maintain instead of a system you build. Here's the truth most people won't accept. High performers don't have more discipline than you. They don't have more willpower. They don't wake up feeling more motivated. What they have is a life structure that removes the decision-making that causes most people to quit. They've built systems that make execution automatic and retreat inconvenient. And that's what this is about. Not inspiration. Not motivation. Not another speech about believing in yourself. This is about the specific behavioral mechanics that separate people who execute from people who plan to execute. This is about why intelligent, capable people stay stuck while less talented people advance. This is about closing the commitment gap. You're going to learn 3 things. First, why decision fatigue is killing your progress and how to eliminate it. Second, how to build a life structure that enforces follow-through without requiring willpower. Third, how to shift from someone who's interested in results to someone who's structurally incapable of not producing them. By the end of this, you'll understand that success isn't about wanting it more. It's about designing a life where not succeeding becomes more uncomfortable than succeeding. And if you're willing to rebuild your structure instead of just refreshing your motivation, 12 months from now your life will look completely different. Not because you became a different person, but because you stopped giving yourself the option to stay the same. Now pay attention. Because what separates people who achieve from people who admire has nothing to do with talent and everything to do with what you're about to learn. Every morning, you wake up with a fixed amount of mental energy. Call it decision capacity. And every choice you make throughout the day, no matter how small, depletes it. What to wear, what to eat, when to start working, whether to check your phone, whether to exercise, whether to work on your goal, or handle something easier first. By noon, you've already made dozens of micro-decisions. By evening, your capacity is nearly gone. And this is when most people try to do their most important work. This is when they try to execute on their goals. This is when they expect themselves to have discipline. But discipline isn't a character trait. It's a limited resource. And you've already spent it deciding what to have for breakfast. This is why you fail. Not because you're weak. Because you're trying to make important decisions at the end of a day full of unimportant ones. High performers understand this. They don't try to overcome decision fatigue. They eliminate the decisions. Let me show you what this looks like. There's a reason Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day. There's a reason Barack Obama had his suits pre-selected. There's a reason Jeff Bezos makes his important decisions before lunch. They're not being eccentric. They're conserving decision capacity for things that matter. You're doing the opposite. You're spending your peak mental energy on trivial choices, then wondering why you can't execute when it counts. You're negotiating with yourself all day. Should I do this or that? Should I start now or later? Should I push through or take a break? And each negotiation drains you. By the time you sit down to do real work, you've got nothing left. Here's a specific example. Let's say your goal is to write. Every morning, you wake up and ask yourself, should I write now or after coffee? Should I write at my desk or at the coffee shop? Should I work on the new project or finish the old one? Should I outline first or just start? Each of these questions feels small, but each one consumes decision energy. And after 5 or 6 of them, you're exhausted before you've written a single word. Now compare that to someone who's structured their life differently. They wake up at the same time every day. Their writing space is already set up from the night before. Their coffee is automated. Their phone is in another room. Their calendar has a 2-hour block that says write, with no other options scheduled. They don't ask themselves whether to write. They sit down and write because that's what happens at this time in this place. Same person, same goal, completely different outcome. The first person is relying on willpower. The second person has eliminated the need for willpower by removing decisions. One exhausts themselves deciding. The other conserves energy for executing. This is the hidden tax you're paying. Every time you leave a decision open, you're taxing your future self. Every time you say, I'll figure it out when I get there, you're guaranteeing you'll be too depleted to figure it out well. Every time you keep your options flexible, you're ensuring you'll choose the easiest option, not the best one. Let me give you the mechanics of how this destroys progress. You wake up Monday with good intentions. You tell yourself today is different, but you haven't structured anything. So when 10 a.m. arrives and you're supposed to work on your business, you ask yourself, should I really start now, or should I handle these emails first? Emails feel urgent. Your business feels important, but not urgent. Urgent wins. You handle emails. Now it's 11 a.m. You ask yourself, should I start now or should I grab lunch first? You're a little hungry. You decide to eat. Now it's noon. You ask yourself, should I start now or should I wait until after this meeting? The meeting is at 2 p.m. You decide to wait so you have a clear block. 2 p.m. comes. The meeting runs long. Now it's 3 p.m. and you're tired from the meeting. You ask yourself, should I start now when I'm depleted or should I wait until tomorrow when I'm fresh? You've just negotiated yourself out of an entire day. And here's the critical part. You didn't fail because you're lazy. You failed because you left every decision open. You created dozens of moments where retreat was an option. And when retreat is an option, most people take it. High performers don't operate like this. They don't leave decisions open. They make one decision, once, and then they build structure that eliminates future negotiations. They decide they're going to work on their business from 9 to 11 a.m. every weekday. Then they put it on the calendar. Then they tell their team they're unavailable during that time. Then they turn off notifications. Then they close their email. Then they remove every condition that would allow them to negotiate. Now when 9 a.m. arrives, there's no decision to make. The structure is already in place. The environment is already prepared. Retreat would require active effort. Reopening email, canceling the calendar block, explaining to their team why they're available after saying they weren't. It's easier to just start working. The decision was already made. Now it's just execution. This is the first principle of closing the commitment gap. Eliminate decisions that don't matter so you have capacity for decisions that do. Every choice you can remove from your day is energy you can redirect toward your goal. Every question you can answer once instead of daily is willpower you can conserve for when it counts. Here's what you need to do immediately. Look at your typical day and identify every repeated decision. What time do you wake up? What do you eat for breakfast? When do you work on your goal? Where do you work? What do you wear? What do you do first? Every repeated decision is a leak in your system. Now make those decisions once. Pick a wake time. Pick a breakfast. Pick a work block. Pick a location. Pick an outfit. Write them down. Put them on your calendar. Then follow them for 30 days without negotiating. Not because they're perfect, they're not. But because making the same imperfect decision 30 times is better than making a perfect decision once and then negotiating with yourself 29 times. You'll notice something in the first week. You'll have more energy. Not because you're sleeping more or eating better. Because you're not spending mental energy on trivial negotiations. You'll sit down to work and actually have the capacity to work because you haven't depleted yourself deciding whether to work. And here's what most people miss. This isn't about removing all flexibility from your life. It's about removing flexibility from the things that matter. High performers are rigid about their core commitments and flexible about everything else. They don't negotiate about their morning routine, their work blocks, their health habits. But they're completely flexible about which restaurant to eat at or which movie to watch because those decisions don't compound. You're doing the opposite. You're flexible about the things that compound and rigid about the things that don't. You'll spend 20 minutes deciding where to eat lunch, but you won't commit to a consistent work schedule. You'll debate which productivity app to use, but you won't eliminate distractions during work time. You're optimizing the wrong variables. Here's the test. Look at your calendar right now. Is your most important work scheduled at a specific time in a specific place with specific conditions that make it easy to start? Or is it something you'll fit in when you find time? If it's the second one, you won't do it. Not because you don't care. Because you've left the decision open, and open decisions get negotiated, and negotiations favor comfort. Close the decision. Make it once. Build structure around it. Then protect that structure like it's the most valuable thing you own. Because it is. Your ability to execute doesn't come from wanting it more. It comes from removing the conditions that allow you to want it without doing it. Most people will hear this and think it sounds restrictive. They'll say they don't want to live like a robot. They'll say they value spontaneity. And they'll stay exactly where they are. Because what they're really saying is, I want results, but I'm not willing to remove the conditions that prevent results. I want to change, but I'm not willing to change the structure that produces my current outcomes. You can't have both. You can have flexibility and average results. Or you can have structure and exceptional results. High performers chose structure. The question is whether you will too. Let's talk about why New Year's resolutions fail. It's not because people don't mean it when they make them. Most people genuinely want to change on January 1st. The problem is they're trying to change behavior without changing environment. They're trying to build discipline without building systems. And it doesn't work. Here's what actually happens. Someone decides they're going to get in shape. They feel motivated. They buy gym clothes. Maybe they buy a membership. They tell their friends. They feel committed. Then January 2nd arrives. They wake up. They think about going to the gym. They feel a little tired. They tell themselves they'll go after work. Work is busy. They're exhausted by evening. They tell themselves they'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow comes. Same pattern. By January 15th, they're done. Now here's the question. Did they fail because they lacked discipline? No. They failed because they built a commitment that depended entirely on discipline. Every single day required a fresh decision to go to the gym. Every single day created an opportunity to negotiate. Every single day tested their willpower. And willpower loses to convenience almost every time. Compare that to someone who approaches it differently. They don't just decide to get in shape. They build an enforcement system. They hire a trainer and pay for a month up front. Now there's financial commitment. They schedule sessions at 6 a.m. 3 days a week. Now there's time commitment. They tell the trainer to call if they don't show up. Now there's social commitment. They put their gym clothes next to their bed. Now there's environmental support. They set their coffee maker to brew at 5:45 a.m. Now there's a routine trigger. Same goal. Completely different structure. The first person is fighting their environment every day. The second person has designed an environment that makes going to the gym easier than not going. The first person needs discipline. The second person needs discipline only once, when they built the system. This is what I mean by commitment enforcement. It's not about trying harder. It's about making retreat more costly than follow through. It's about building external structures that compensate for internal weakness. It's about recognizing that you're not going to feel motivated most days, so you need systems that work when motivation is absent. Let me give you another example. Let's say you want to build a business. Most people approach this the same way. They decide they're going to work on it. They feel excited. They spend a few hours researching. They feel productive. Then the next day comes. They're busy with their job. They think they'll work on it tonight. Tonight comes. They're tired. They think they'll work on it this weekend. Weekend comes. They have obligations. They think they'll work on it next week. Next week comes. Same cycle. Months pass. Nothing's built. Why? Because there was no enforcement mechanism. Every instance of working on the business required a fresh decision. Every instance created an opportunity to choose something easier. There was no cost to not working on it. No external pressure. No accountability. Just internal intention. And internal intention without external structure produces almost nothing. Now let's restructure this. The person doesn't just decide to build a business. They quit their job. Now there's pressure. Or they don't quit, but they wake up 2 hours earlier and go to a coffee shop every morning. Now there's routine. Or they find a business partner who expects updates. Now there's accountability. Or they prepay for services they need. Now there's financial investment. Or they tell their family this is what they're doing. Now there's social pressure. Each of these things creates an enforcement mechanism. Each one makes follow-through slightly easier and retreat slightly harder. And when you stack enough of them, execution becomes automatic. Not because the person suddenly developed superhuman discipline, but because they removed the conditions that allow people to quit quietly. This is the critical insight most people miss. They think high performers are more committed internally. They're not. They're more committed structurally. They've built systems that enforce behavior when feelings fail. They've created costs for quitting that make quitting uncomfortable. They've removed the easy exits. Here's how to build your own enforcement system. Start with your goal. Let's say it's to write a book. Most people would say, I'm going to write for an hour every day. That's a decision that needs to be remade every day. That's weak commitment. Strong commitment would be, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m., go to this specific coffee shop, sit in this specific seat, and write until 7 a.m. I'm going to do this Monday through Friday for the next 6 months. I'm going to tell 3 people about this schedule. I'm going to track each session. And if I miss a session, I'm going to donate $100 to a charity I hate. Now let's compare these. The first version requires discipline every single day. The second version requires discipline once, when you build the system. After that, it's just execution. The first version has no cost for skipping. The second version has multiple costs: social embarrassment, broken tracking streak, financial loss, and the disruption of a routine. The first version is all internal. The second version is all external. Which one do you think produces results? The second one. Every time. Not because the person has more willpower, but because they've engineered commitment instead of hoping for it. Let me give you the formula. Effective commitment enforcement has 5 components. First, pre-commitment. You commit before the moment of decision. You don't decide each morning whether to write. You decided 6 months ago that you write Monday through Friday at 5 a.m. The decision is already made. Each morning is just execution. Second, accountability. Someone else knows what you're supposed to do. This could be a partner, a coach, a friend, or a public audience. The point is that not doing it has social cost. You're not just letting yourself down. You're letting someone else down. That's a stronger motivator. Third, financial stakes. You've invested money in a way that's lost if you quit. This could be paying for a program up front, hiring someone, buying equipment, or literally betting money on your follow-through. Money makes it real. When there's no financial skin in the game, quitting is free. Fourth, environmental design. Your physical space supports the behavior. If you're trying to write, your desk is clear, your phone is in another room, and your writing tools are ready. If you're trying to exercise, your gym clothes are laid out, and your bag is packed. The environment is already set up for success, so you're not fighting friction. Fifth, tracking. You're measuring adherence, not just outcomes. You're marking down each day you do what you said you'd do. This creates a visual streak that becomes psychologically costly to break. It also gives you data. If you're only following through 60% of the time, you know your system needs adjustment. When you combine these 5 elements, you create enforcement. Behavior happens even when you don't feel like it because the system is stronger than your mood. This is how high performers operate. They don't rely on daily motivation. They built enforcement systems years ago, and now behavior is automatic. Here's what this looks like in practice. Let's say your goal is to build financial independence. Weak commitment. I'm going to save money and invest. Strong commitment. I'm going to automate 20% of my income into an investment account on the day I get paid. I'm going to meet with a financial advisor monthly. I'm going to track my net worth in a spreadsheet that I share with my spouse. I'm going to eliminate subscription services I don't use. And I'm going to set up my checking account so that if the balance gets below a certain amount, I get a daily text alert. See the difference? The first version is a hope. The second version is a machine. The first version requires constant discipline. The second version requires discipline once when you set it up. After that, it runs automatically. And here's the key. The second version doesn't feel like discipline. It feels like structure. High performers don't feel like they're constantly resisting temptation. They've designed a life where temptation doesn't present itself. They're not fighting their environment. Their environment is fighting for them. Most people never build this. They keep trying to change through internal effort alone. They keep relying on willpower. They keep hoping tomorrow will be different. And it never is. Because without enforcement mechanisms, behavior reverts to comfort the moment motivation fades. And motivation always fades. You need to accept this. You're not going to feel motivated most days. You're going to feel tired, distracted, uncertain, and tempted by easier options. That's normal. That's human. High performers feel the same way. The difference is they don't let feelings determine behavior. They built systems that enforce behavior regardless of feelings. So here's the assignment. Pick your most important goal. Now build an enforcement system around it. Add pre-commitment. Add accountability. Add financial stakes. Design your environment. Set up tracking. Make it harder to quit than to continue. Make retreat costly. Remove the easy exits. Do this, and 12 months from now, you won't need to rely on discipline. Your structure will produce results automatically. Don't do this, and 12 months from now, you'll have the same goal with a new set of excuses. High performers built systems. The question is whether you will too. You're keeping one foot out the door. You might not realize it, but you are. You've committed to a goal, but you've left yourself an exit strategy. You've said you're going to do something, but you've kept backup plans available. And this is why you're not making progress. Not because you're not trying. Because you're not fully in. Let me explain what I mean. Every time you keep an alternative available, you're signaling to your brain that this commitment is temporary. You're saying, I'll do this unless something better comes along. Or, I'll try this, but if it gets hard, I can always go back. And your brain hears that. It doesn't allocate full resources to a temporary plan. It stays in assessment mode, constantly evaluating whether to stay or pivot. This shows up everywhere. The person who wants to start a business but keeps their resume updated on LinkedIn. The person who wants to build a relationship but keeps their dating app installed. The person who wants to write a book but keeps saying they'll see how it goes. Each of these people thinks they're being smart. They think they're protecting themselves. They're actually guaranteeing failure. Here's why. When you keep an escape hatch open, quitting is always comfortable. The moment things get difficult, and they always get difficult, you don't have to push through. You can just pivot. You can say this wasn't the right opportunity, or the timing wasn't right, or I gave it a shot. And because the escape hatch is available, that's exactly what you do. Over and over. Different goals, same pattern. Always keeping one foot out the door. Now let's talk about what happens when you remove the escape hatch. When you burn the bridges. When you make retreat uncomfortable or impossible. Suddenly, problems must be solved. Difficulty must be pushed through. There's no comfortable exit. So instead of looking for ways out, your brain starts looking for ways forward. I'll give you a real example. Naval Ravikant talks about this in the context of entrepreneurship. He says the difference between people who build successful companies and people who dabble is that the successful ones made retreat impossible. They quit their job. They went all in. They told everyone what they were doing. They burned the ships. And because of that, when problems came up, and problems always come up, they couldn't quit quietly. They had to solve it. The social cost of failure was too high. The financial cost of turning back was too high. So they figured it out. Compare that to the person who keeps their job while testing a side business. When the business hits its first real obstacle, what do? They tell themselves it's not working. They tell themselves they'll try again when they have more time. They tell themselves this wasn't the right idea. And they go back to their comfortable job. They didn't fail because the business was bad. They failed because retreat was available. This is the escape hatch problem. And it's costing you everything. Because you can't build anything significant while keeping comfortable alternatives available. Significant things require full commitment. They require periods of difficulty where quitting looks attractive. And if quitting is available, most people quit. Now let me be clear. I'm not saying you should be reckless. I'm not saying you should quit your job with no savings and no plan. I'm saying that once you've done the preparation, once you've made the decision, you need to close the exits. You need to make retreat uncomfortable enough that pushing forward is easier. Here's what this looks like in practice. Let's say you want to build a consulting business. Weak approach. I'm going to try consulting on weekends and see if I can get clients. Strong approach. I'm going to quit my job in 6 months. Between now and then, I'm going to save 6 months of expenses, line up 2 anchor clients, and build a portfolio. On month 6, I'm quitting regardless of whether I feel ready. And I'm telling my boss now, so there's no backing out. The second approach closes the escape hatch. It creates a deadline. It adds pressure. It makes retreat socially costly because you've already announced your intention. And most importantly, it forces you to treat this seriously because you've given yourself a hard deadline where the safety net disappears. Or let's say you want to write. Weak approach. I'm going to write when I have time and see if I'm any good at it. Strong approach. I'm going to write 500 words every morning for the next 90 days. I'm going to post publicly every Friday. I'm going to tell 3 people they're allowed to call me out if I don't post. And at the end of 90 days, I'm going to compile everything and self-publish it even if it's imperfect. Again, the second approach eliminates retreat. It adds public accountability. It sets a forcing function. It makes quitting uncomfortable. And because of that, the person actually does it. Not because they have more talent or more time, but because they remove the option to quietly bail. This is what high performers understand. They don't keep escape hatches open. They don't maintain backup plans. They don't hedge. Once they've decided on a direction, they go all in. And this focus, this refusal to keep one foot out the door, is what produces results. Now I know what you're thinking. But what if I pick the wrong thing? What if I commit fully and then it doesn't work? Here's the truth. You probably will pick wrong sometimes. You probably will commit to things that don't pan out. But you know what's worse? Never committing fully to anything. Spending your entire life testing, exploring, keeping your options open, and never building anything significant because you were always half in. High performers would rather commit fully to the wrong thing and learn quickly than commit partially to the right thing and make no progress. Because full commitment teaches you fast. You get real feedback. You find out what works and what doesn't. You develop skills. And even if it doesn't pan out, you're better positioned for the next thing because you actually went deep on something. Partial commitment teaches you nothing. You can't tell if something doesn't work because the idea was bad or because you didn't really try. You can't develop skills because you never went deep enough. You can't build momentum because you kept stopping and pivoting. You just stay stuck in perpetual exploration mode, always interested in everything, committed to nothing. So here's what you need to do. Identify the escape hatches you're keeping open. What backup plans are you maintaining? What safety nets are you unwilling to remove? What language are you using that signals you're not really in? I'm going to try this. I'm going to see how it goes. I'll give it a shot. That's escape hatch language. That's the language of someone who's keeping one foot out the door. Now close those hatches. Stop trying. Start committing. Stop seeing how it goes. Start making it go. Stop giving it a shot. Start going all in. This doesn't mean being stupid. It means that once you've done your homework, once you've made your decision, you remove the comfortable exits. Tell people what you're doing so backing out is embarrassing. Invest money so quitting means losing money. Burn time bridges by setting public deadlines. Cut off retreat paths by making commitments that depend on follow-through. Make it uncomfortable to quit and comfortable to continue. And here's what will happen. You'll panic at first, because suddenly there's real pressure. Suddenly, you can't just casually explore this. Suddenly, you have to make it work. And that's terrifying. But it's also clarifying. Because once retreat isn't available, your brain stops looking for exits and starts looking for solutions. Problems you would have used as excuses to quit become problems you have to solve. And you do solve them. Not because you're more capable than before, but because you have no other option. This is how people surprise themselves with what they're capable of. Not by being more talented than they thought, but by closing escape hatches and discovering they can push through way more than they believed. The capability was always there. It just wasn't activated because retreat was always available. Most people will hear this and do nothing. They'll say they agree. Then they'll keep their safety nets in place. They'll keep their backup plans active. They'll keep one foot out the door. And 5 years from now, they'll still be exploring options, while high performers are already successful on their second or third venture. You can't have both. You can't have security and significant results. You can't have all your options open and deep commitment. You have to choose. High performers chose commitment. The question is whether you will too. Here's something most people don't understand about success. It doesn't scale linearly. If you work twice as hard on twice as many things, you don't get twice the results. You get a fraction of the results. But if you work twice as hard on one thing, you get 10 times the results. That's the focus multiplier. And most people never experience it because they're spreading their effort across too many targets. Let me show you why this happens. Imagine you have 10 hours a week to work on goals outside your day job. Most people would think, great, I can work on my fitness for 3 hours, my side business for 3 hours, learning Spanish for 2 hours, and reading for 2 hours. That sounds balanced. It sounds productive. It produces almost nothing. Here's what actually happens with that approach. The fitness gets 3 hours, But that's barely enough to maintain, not enough to transform. The business gets 3 hours, but that's not enough to get traction. Learning Spanish for 2 hours a week means you'll still be a beginner in a year. Reading 2 hours a week means you finish maybe 1 book a month. At the end of 12 months, you're slightly better at everything and exceptional at nothing. Now let's redistribute those 10 hours. You put all 10 hours into building the business. Nothing else. Fitness maintenance only, no improvement goals. No Spanish. No new book goals. Just business. What happens? The business actually gets off the ground. Because 10 hours a week for a year is 520 hours. That's enough to build something real. That's enough to get traction. That's enough to start generating income. And here's the critical part. Once the business is generating income, it makes everything else easier. You can afford a personal trainer for fitness. You can pay for immersive Spanish if you still want it. You can buy all the books you want. But more importantly, you've proven to yourself that you can finish something significant. And that proof compounds into everything you do next. This is the focus multiplier. Concentrated effort over time produces exponential results. Scattered effort over time produces linear disappointment. But most people never concentrate their effort because they've been taught that balance is good and putting all your eggs in one basket is risky. That might be true for financial investments. It's terrible advice for personal development. Let me give you a real-world example. There's a guy named James Clear who wrote a book called Atomic Habits. Before he wrote that book, he was writing blog posts about habits. He posted them twice a week, every week, for 3 years. Not sometimes. Not when he felt like it. Twice a week, every week, for 3 years. That's obsessive focus on one thing. And that obsessive focus led to an email list, which led to speaking opportunities, which led to a book deal, which led to a book that sold 15 million copies. Now imagine if he'd split his time. If he'd written 1 blog post a week about habits, 1 about productivity, 1 about fitness, and 1 about finance. He'd have been producing the same amount of content. But none of those topics would have reached critical mass. He wouldn't have become known for any one thing. He wouldn't have built a focused audience. And he probably wouldn't have a book deal because publishers don't want the guy who writes about everything. They want the guy who's the definitive expert on X. This is what focus does. It lets you go deep enough to actually break through. It lets you build expertise. It lets you create work that compounds. It makes you referable because people know what you're about. And it produces momentum because each thing you create builds on the last thing instead of starting from scratch every time. Most people never experience this because they're constantly pivoting. They work on something for a few weeks or months, don't see immediate results, then switch to something else. They mistake activity for progress. They're busy, but they're not building. And 10 years later, they have a resume of things they've tried and nothing they've mastered. High performers do the opposite. They pick one thing. They go all in on that thing. They stay with it past the point where most people would quit. And they don't move to the next thing until the current thing is done or until they have clear evidence, not just feelings, that it's not working. Let me give you a framework for this. It's called sequential mastery. Instead of trying to improve everything simultaneously, you improve things in sequence. You pick one target. You focus on it exclusively until you hit your goal or until you reach competence. Then, and only then, you move to the next target. Here's what this looks like in practice. Year 1. Build the business to $100,000 revenue. That's the only goal. Fitness maintenance only. Relationships maintenance only. All discretionary time goes to business. Year 2. Business is at $100,000. Now the goal is to systematize it so it runs with less of your time. And you add a fitness goal. Get to 15% body fat. Year 3. Business is systematized. You're lean. Now you add a relationship goal. Find a long-term partner. Or a learning goal. Learn to code. Or a wealth goal. Build your investment portfolio to $X. See how this works? Each year, you add one major thing. But you never subtract the previous thing. You just systematize it so it runs with less active effort. The business doesn't disappear in year 2. You've just built enough systems that it doesn't require 10 hours a week. So now you have capacity for fitness. And in year 3, both the business and fitness are systematized enough that you have capacity for something new. This is sequential mastery. And it produces more in 5 years than most people produce in 20, because you're actually finishing things instead of perpetually starting them. You're going deep instead of staying shallow. You're building expertise instead of sampling everything. Now let's contrast this with the typical approach. Most people have a list of 10 goals. They work on all 10 simultaneously. They make marginal progress on all 10. None of them reach completion. Next year, they have the same 10 goals plus 3 new ones. They work on all 13. Same pattern. 5 years later, they have 20 goals, 0 completed, and they wonder why they're not further along. It's because they violated the focus multiplier. They spread their efforts so thin that no single target received enough concentration to break through. They were always in the frustrating middle zone where you're working hard, but not seeing results because you haven't been at it long enough in any one direction. High performers understand this. They'd rather have one completed goal than 10 in-progress goals. Because completed goals produce confidence. They produce proof. They produce momentum. And they free up capacity for the next goal. In-progress goals do none of that. They just consume energy and produce guilt. So here's what you need to do. Look at your current goal list. I'm guessing you have at least 5 things you're working on. Now cut it down to 1. Not your top 3. 1. The one thing that, if you achieved it, would make everything else easier or unnecessary. That's your focus for the next 12 months. Everything else goes on pause. Not forever. Just until this one thing is done. You're not going to work on your fitness and your business and your relationship and your finances and your Spanish all at the same time. You're going to pick the one that matters most right now and put all your discretionary energy there. And I know what you're thinking. But I can't ignore my health. But I can't ignore my relationships. You're not ignoring them. You're maintaining them. There's a difference between maintenance and improvement. Maintenance takes minimal energy. Improvement takes focused energy. High performers maintain most things and improve one thing at a time. So yes, you still exercise. But you're not trying to PR your deadlift. You're doing 30-minute maintenance workouts 3 times a week. Yes, you still spend time with your partner. But you're not trying to dramatically improve your relationship right now. You're maintaining connection. Your improvement energy goes to the one target that's most important right now. And here's what will happen. 6 months in, you'll see real progress on your one thing. Because you've been working on it consistently without dilution. 12 months in, you'll have achieved it, or you'll be so close that completion is inevitable. And now you have proof. You've demonstrated to yourself that when you focus, you get results. And that proof becomes fuel for the next goal. Most people never get this proof because they never focus long enough. They're always starting, never finishing. Always interested, never deep. Always busy, never effective. And they wonder why high performers seem to accomplish so much when they don't seem to be working any harder. It's because high performers work sequentially. They finish one thing, then start the next. Most people work simultaneously. They start 10 things, finish none, and repeat the cycle year after year. You have to choose. You can work on everything and build nothing. Or you can work on one thing and build something real. High performers chose focus. The question is whether you will too. There's a moment when you stop doing something and start being someone. That shift is everything. And most people never make it because they're still operating at the level of actions instead of identity. Let me explain what I mean. Right now, you're probably thinking about your goals as things you do. I'm trying to work out more. I'm trying to build a business. I'm trying to write. That's action-level thinking. You're a person who's attempting certain behaviors. Behaviors aren't part of who you are. They're things you're trying on. High performers don't think this way. They've made an identity shift. They don't say, I'm trying to work out. They say, I'm an athlete. They don't say, I'm trying to build a business. They say, I'm an entrepreneur. They don't say, I'm trying to write. They say, I'm a writer. The difference seems small. It's actually massive. Because when something is part of your identity, you don't have to convince yourself to do it. Athletes don't debate whether to train. That's just what athletes do. Entrepreneurs don't debate whether to work on their business. That's just what entrepreneurs do. Writers don't debate whether to write. That's just what writers do. The behavior flows from the identity. There's no internal negotiation. But when something is just an action you're attempting, you debate it constantly. Should I work out today or take a rest day? Should I work on my business or relax? Should I write or watch TV? Every instance requires a fresh decision. Every decision depletes willpower. And eventually, you stop doing the thing because the internal debate is exhausting. This is why identity shifts produce lasting change, and goal setting produces temporary effort. Goals are external targets you're trying to hit. Identity is who you are. And people are remarkably consistent about acting in alignment with their identity, even when it's uncomfortable. Let me give you an example. Someone who identifies as a person who wants to quit smoking might succeed temporarily. But when stress hits, they'll smoke again because smoking isn't inconsistent with their identity. They're just a person trying to quit, not a non-smoker. But someone who shifts their identity to I am a non-smoker won't smoke when stress hits because smoking would violate their identity. They've changed who they are, not just what they're trying to do. Same thing applies to everything else. The person who says, I'm trying to lose weight, will diet temporarily. The person who says, I'm a healthy person, will make healthy choices permanently because unhealthy choices violate their identity. The person who says, I'm trying to be more productive, will have good weeks and bad weeks. The person who says, I'm a professional, will be consistent because inconsistency violates their identity. So how do you shift identity? Most people think you have to believe it first. You don't. You prove it first, and belief follows. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you're becoming. Do the thing enough times, and the identity solidifies. Here's how this works in practice. Let's say you want to become a writer. You don't start by trying to feel like a writer. You start by writing. Every day you write, you cast a vote for, I am a writer. After a week, you have 7 votes. After a month, you have 30 votes. After a year, you have 365 votes. At some point, usually around 60 to 90 days, the evidence becomes overwhelming. You don't have to convince yourself you're a writer anymore. You just are. Because the data proves it. This is how identity shifts happen. Through accumulated evidence. Not through affirmations. Not through visualization. Through actions that pile up until the identity claim becomes undeniable. But here's the critical part. The actions must be consistent with the identity you're claiming. You can't claim to be an athlete and skip workouts. You can't claim to be an entrepreneur and not work on your business. You can't claim to be a writer and not write. Every time you act in contradiction to your claimed identity, you're casting a vote against it. And if you cast enough votes against it, the identity never forms. This is why most people's identity shifts fail. They claim an identity. I'm a healthy person, then they eat junk food. They're confused when the identity doesn't stick. It doesn't stick because they're casting more votes against it than for it. Your identity is determined by your most frequent behaviors, not your occasional ones. So here's what you need to do. Pick the identity you want to embody. Not the goal you want to achieve, the person you want to become. I am a disciplined person. I am a builder. I am someone who finishes what they start. I am a professional. Write it down. Say it out loud. Then start voting for it. Every time you do what a disciplined person would do, you vote for that identity. Every time you work on building when you don't feel like it, you vote for that identity. Every time you finish something instead of leaving it incomplete, you vote for that identity. Stack enough votes, and the identity becomes real. And here's what most people miss. The votes count even when they're small. You don't have to do something huge every day. You just have to do something aligned with your identity. If your identity is, I'm a writer, then writing 100 words counts. It's a vote. Do it every day, and by the end of the year, you've cast 365 votes. That's enough to shift identity. Most people don't do this because they're still focused on outcomes instead of identity. They're trying to finish a book instead of become a writer. And when finishing the book feels overwhelming, they quit. But if they'd focused on the identity, I'm a writer and writers write, the book would have gotten finished as a byproduct of consistent identity-aligned behavior. Let me give you a real example of this. There's a developer named John Carmack who co-founded ID Software and developed games like Doom and Quake. He's been programming since he was a teenager. And if you ask him why he's so good at programming, he doesn't say because I'm talented or because I'm smart. He says because I'm a programmer and programmers program. That's his identity. So he programs. Every day. For decades. And that consistency produced expertise that looks like genius to outside observers. But it's not genius. It's identity-driven behavior compounded over time. This is what you need to build. Not goals. Not motivation. Identity. Because identity produces behavior automatically. You don't need discipline when your behavior is just an expression of who you are. You don't need willpower when acting in alignment with your identity is the default. And here's the best part. Once an identity is established, it's hard to break. Because violating your identity creates cognitive dissonance. It feels wrong. I'm a professional, so why am I showing up late? The discomfort forces you back into alignment. The identity becomes self-reinforcing. Most people never get here because they never accumulate enough evidence. They do the thing sporadically. They cast a vote, then don't cast another vote for a week. The identity never forms because the evidence is too sparse. You need frequency. You need consistency. You need to stack votes daily so the evidence accumulates faster than it degrades. Here's what high performers did that you haven't done yet. They decided who they were going to be, then they acted like that person until the identity became real. They didn't wait to feel like an athlete before training like one. They trained like one until they became one. They didn't wait to feel like an entrepreneur before acting like one. They acted like one until they became one. You're doing the opposite. You're waiting to feel like the person you want to become before acting like them. And you'll wait forever. Because feeling follows action. Identity follows evidence. You can't think your way into a new identity. You have to act your way into it. So pick your identity. Claim it today. Then start voting for it. Every day, one action at a time. Don't worry about whether you really are that person yet. Just act like you are. Stack the votes. Let the evidence accumulate. And at some point, usually faster than you think, the identity will solidify. And when it does, behavior becomes automatic. Because you're not trying to do things anymore. You're just being who you are. Most people will hear this and do nothing. They'll keep setting goals instead of building identity. They'll keep trying to change behavior instead of changing who they are. And 5 years from now, they'll still be trying to be different instead of actually being different. You can't try your way into change. You have to become your way into it. High performers became. The question is whether you will too. Let me tell you the real reason people quit. It's not because they're weak. It's not because they lack talent. It's because they expected progress to be faster than it actually is. They had a timeline in their head, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, And when that timeline passed without the results they imagined, they concluded it wasn't working. And they moved on. This is the single biggest mistake people make. They quit right before the breakthrough. Because most things don't produce visible results for way longer than people expect. You can work hard for months and see nothing. Then, seemingly overnight, everything clicks. But you only get to experience that if you're still there. And most people aren't. Here's why this happens. Progress isn't linear. It's not like you work hard for 1 month and see 10% progress. Work hard for 2 months and see 20% progress. Work hard for 10 months and see 100% progress. It doesn't work like that. For most things, progress is invisible for a long time. You're building underground. You're laying foundation. Then, at some point, you break through the surface and suddenly progress becomes visible and rapid. But you have to survive the underground phase first. Most people quit during the underground phase because they can't see what they're building. They look at their business and it's generating $500 a month and they think, I've been working on this for 6 months and it's only making $500 a month. This is never going to work. What they don't realize is that if they kept going, month 7 might be $800. Month 8 might be $1,200. Month 10 might be $3,000. It's not linear. It compounds. But compounding requires time. And most people don't give it time. Let me give you a real example of this. There's a YouTuber named Mr. Beast. He's now one of the biggest creators on the platform. He makes tens of millions a year. But for the first few years, he was making nothing. He was posting videos consistently, multiple times per week, and getting a few hundred views per video. For years, most people would have quit. They would have said, I've been doing this for 2 years, and I'm still getting 300 views per video. This isn't working. He didn't quit. He kept going. He kept experimenting. He kept improving. And then, at some point, something clicked. One video hit. Then another. Then his channel exploded. Now he gets tens of millions of views per video. But none of that would have happened if he'd quit in year 2 when the results were still invisible. This is the persistence advantage. And it's not about working harder. It's about working longer. Most people work hard for a short time. High performers work consistently for a long time. And long-term consistency beats short-term intensity every single time. Here's the math. Let's say you and a competitor both start building a business. You work 60 hours a week for 3 months, then burn out and quit. Your competitor works 20 hours a week, but doesn't quit. After 3 months, you've put in 720 hours. They've put in 240 hours. You're ahead. But you stop. They keep going. By month 6, they've put in 480 hours. By month 12, they've put in 960 hours. By month 24, they've put in 1,920 hours. They passed you. Not because they worked harder in any given week, but because they were still there. And after 2 years of steady work, they've built something real while you've moved on to your next 3-month sprint on a different idea. This is why persistence is an advantage. Not because it takes special talent. Because most people quit. If you simply don't quit, you're already in the top 10% of people who started the same thing you did. And if you keep going long enough, you're in the top 1%. Not because you're better, but because everyone else stopped. Now let me tell you what makes persistence possible. It's not motivation. Motivation fades. It's not willpower. Willpower depletes. It's removing the option to quit. It's building a life where continuing is easier than stopping. It's lowering the daily cost of persistence so that you can sustain it indefinitely. Here's what I mean. Most people try to persist through intensity. They work at 100% effort and wonder why they burn out. High performers persist through consistency. They work at 60 to 70% effort, but they never stop. And 60% effort sustained for 2 years produces way more than 100% effort sustained for 3 months. So the key to persistence isn't pushing harder. It's making the work sustainable. It's finding a pace you can maintain indefinitely. It's building a routine that doesn't depend on motivation. It's automating as much as possible so that daily effort is minimal. And it's extending your timeline so that you're not expecting results tomorrow. Let me give you a framework for this. First, set a minimum viable action. This is the smallest version of your work that still counts. If your goal is to write a book, the minimum viable action might be writing 200 words. Not 2,000 words. 200 words. Because 200 words is easy. You can do it even on days when you're tired. You can do it even on days when you're not motivated. And doing 200 words every day for a year is 73,000 words. That's a book. Most people don't do this. They set ambitious daily targets. I'm going to write 2,000 words every day. Then they miss a day, feel guilty, and stop. High performers set minimums they can sustain forever. And by sustaining them, they actually produce more than people who sprint and quit. Second, measure streaks, not outcomes. Don't measure whether your business made money this month. Measure whether you worked on it every day this month. Don't measure whether your book is published yet. Measure whether you wrote every day this month. Outcomes lag. Behavior is immediate. And if you maintain the behavior, the outcomes will eventually come. But if you only measure outcomes, you'll get discouraged during the lag period and quit. Third, plan for bad days. Everyone has days when they're tired, sick, distracted, or unmotivated. Most people have no plan for these days, so they skip their work. High performers have a bad day protocol. On bad days, they do the minimum viable action. They don't skip entirely. This keeps the streak alive and prevents the break in momentum that leads to quitting. Fourth, extend your timeline. If you think your business will be profitable in 6 months, and it's not, you'll quit. If you think it'll be profitable in 2 years, and it's not profitable after 6 months, you'll keep going. Most people quit because their timeline is too short. High performers succeed because they give themselves enough time to actually build something. Fifth, remove quitting triggers. What makes people quit? Usually it's comparison. They see someone else further along and think, I'm so far behind. What's the point? Or it's doubt. They hit a rough patch and think, this isn't working. High performers remove these triggers. They don't compare. They don't consume content from people in their space because it triggers comparison. They don't evaluate their progress based on short-term results. They committed to a timeline, usually 1 to 3 years, and they don't. Reassess until that timeline is up. When you do these 5 things, persistence stops being hard. Because you're not relying on motivation to push through. You've designed a system where continuation is the default. You've made your daily actions so small that skipping feels harder than doing it. You've measured the right things so you stay encouraged. You've planned for setbacks so they don't derail you. You've extended your timeline so early results don't matter. And you've removed the mental triggers that cause people to quit. This is how high performers outlast everyone else. Not through superhuman discipline. Through systems that make persistence automatic. And after months or years of persistence, they hit the breakthrough. They experience the compounding. They get the results. And everyone says, wow, they're so lucky, or wow, they're so talented. But it wasn't luck or talent. It was just showing up longer than everyone else did. Here's what you need to accept. Your first 6 months will probably produce very little. Your first year will probably produce less than you hope. Your first 2 years might still feel slow. That's normal. That's the underground phase. You're building. You're learning. You're compounding actions that haven't produced visible results yet. Most people quit here. They see the lack of visible progress and conclude it's not working. But high performers know better. They know the work is compounding even when results are invisible. They know the breakthrough is coming if they just don't stop. So they don't stop. They keep going. They persist past the point where most people quit. And that's where the advantage is. Not in being better, in being there longer. Not in working harder, and not stopping. This is the persistence advantage. And it's available to you right now. You just have to make one decision. I'm not quitting. Not this month. Not this year. Not until I've given this enough time to actually work. Make that decision. Build the systems that make persistence sustainable. Then let time do its work. Most people won't. They'll quit next month or next quarter. And you'll outlast them. Not because you're more talented, but because you're still there. High performers persisted. The question is whether you will too. There's a phase where doing the work stops feeling like work. Where the behavior becomes so automatic that not doing it feels strange. Where you've repeated something so many times that it's just part of what you do, not something you have to convince yourself to do. This is automaticity, and reaching it changes everything. But most people never get there because they quit during the formation period. They try a new behavior. It feels hard. They rely on motivation to push through. Motivation fades, and they stop. Then they try something else. Same pattern. They spend their entire lives starting things and never reaching the phase where the thing becomes automatic. High performers push through the formation period. They understand that the first 60 to 90 days of any new behavior are the hardest. It requires conscious effort. It requires discipline. It requires systems. But if you can maintain consistency through this period, something shifts. The behavior becomes a habit. It requires less and less conscious thought. Eventually, it's just something you do. And once you reach that phase, the behavior sustains itself. Let me explain the neuroscience of why this happens. Your brain builds neural pathways based on repeated behavior. The first time you do something, there's no pathway. Your brain has to consciously direct the action. It's effortful. But every time you repeat the behavior, the pathway strengthens. After enough repetitions, the pathway is so strong that the behavior fires automatically when the right trigger appears. This is habit formation, and it's the most powerful tool you have for behavior change. But here's the key. You have to repeat the behavior consistently for long enough that the pathway fully forms. If you do it sometimes, once a week, or a few times a month, the pathway never solidifies. You stay in the conscious effort phase forever. But if you do it every day for 2 to 3 months, the pathway solidifies and the behavior becomes automatic. Let me give you a practical example. Someone decides they want to wake up at 5 a.m. to work on their business before their day job. Week 1 is brutal. Their body resists. Their mind offers every reason to stay in bed. They have to force themselves up. Week 2 is slightly easier, but still hard. Week 3, they're getting used to it. Week 6, it's starting to feel normal. Week 8, they wake up naturally at 5 a.m. without an alarm. Week 12, not waking up at 5 a.m. feels wrong. The behavior is now automatic. Compare this to someone who tries to wake up early when they can. Monday they wake up at 5 a.m. Wednesday they sleep in because they're tired. Friday they wake up at 5 a.m. Next Monday they sleep in because they stayed up late. They're still making the decision fresh every morning. The neural pathway never forms. 5 years later, they still struggle with waking up early because they never pushed through to automaticity. This is why consistency beats intensity. Intense effort for a week, then taking breaks, produces nothing permanent. Moderate effort every single day for months produces automaticity. And automaticity is what makes behavior permanent. Now here's what most people miss. They try to automate too many things at once. They decide, I'm going to wake up early, work out, eat healthy, meditate, write, and work on my business. That's 6 new behaviors. All require conscious effort. All deplete the same willpower resource. They last a week, maybe 2, then collapse under the cognitive load. High performers automate one behavior at a time. They pick the most important one. They focus on making that automatic. Once it's automatic, meaning they do it every day without thinking about it, they add the next behavior. This is sequential habit formation. And it's why high performers seem to do so much effortlessly. They're not doing it effortlessly. They automated it years ago through focused repetition. Here's the framework. Pick one behavior. The one behavior that, if automated, would have the biggest impact on your goal. For most people building a business, it's working on the business every morning for a set amount of time. For people focused on health, it's exercising daily. For people wanting to build knowledge, it's reading or studying daily. Pick one. Now commit to doing that behavior every single day for 90 days. Not most days. Every day? Because consistency is what forms the neural pathway. Missing days disrupts the formation process. You want to build such a strong streak that by day 60, breaking the streak feels worse than continuing. Here's how to make this work. First, attach the new behavior to an existing routine. This is called habit stacking. If you already drink coffee every morning, do the new behavior immediately after. If you already brush your teeth, do the new behavior right after. The existing routine becomes the trigger for the new behavior. This makes formation faster because you're leveraging an already automatic behavior. Second, reduce friction to zero. If your behavior is writing, have your laptop open, your document ready, and your coffee made before you sit down. If your behavior is exercising, have your workout clothes laid out and your bag packed. The less friction between trigger and behavior, the easier it is to maintain consistency. Third, never miss twice. This is a James Clear principle, and it's crucial. Missing one day doesn't break the habit formation process. Missing 2 days in a row does. So if you miss one day, do whatever it takes to not miss the next day. Even if it means doing a 2-minute version. Keep the streak alive. Fourth, track it visually. Use a calendar. Mark an X every day you do the behavior. Watch the excess pile up. This creates a visual representation of your streak, which becomes psychologically costly to break. The longer the streak, the more you want to maintain it. Fifth, expect resistance and push through it. Days 1 to 10 will be hard. Days 10 to 30 will still require conscious effort. Days 30 to 60 will start feeling normal. Days 60 to 90 will feel automatic. Most people quit somewhere in the first 30 days because they're still in the effortful phase. But if you push through to day 60, you're almost there. The hardest part is behind you. When you do this, something remarkable happens. Around day 60 to 90, the behavior stops feeling like something you're doing and starts feeling like something you are. You're not someone trying to wake up early. You're a morning person. You're not someone trying to write. You're a writer who writes. The identity shift we talked about earlier solidifies because the evidence is overwhelming. And now the behavior sustains itself. You don't need discipline anymore. You don't need motivation. You don't need willpower. You just do the thing because that's what you do. And this frees up your mental energy for other things. You're no longer spending energy deciding whether to do it. The decision was made 90 days ago. Now it's just execution. This is the automaticity breakthrough. And it's why high performers seem to accomplish so much. They're not doing more things. They've automated more things. They built morning routines years ago that are now automatic. They built work habits years ago that are now automatic. They built health habits years ago that are now automatic. And because these things are automatic, they have cognitive capacity left over for creative work, strategic thinking, and new challenges. Most people never reach this phase because they're constantly starting over. They try a new routine, stick with it for a few weeks, stop, try a different routine. They're perpetually in the formation phase, which means they're perpetually depleting willpower. They never reach automaticity, so they never experience the phase where good behavior is effortless. You have to stop doing this. You have to pick one behavior, commit to it for 90 days, and push through to automaticity. Then, once that's automatic, add the next behavior. Build your life one automatic behavior at a time. In 5 years, you'll have a dozen automatic behaviors that produce compounding results. In 5 years, most people will still be in the formation phase of their latest New Year's resolution. Here's what your life will look like if you do this. You'll wake up at the same time every day without an alarm. You'll work out without debating it. You'll work on your most important project without negotiating with yourself. You'll eat well without resisting temptation. You'll read without having to find motivation. You'll go to bed at a consistent time without struggling. None of these things will feel like discipline. They'll feel automatic. They'll feel like part of who you are. And because they're automatic, they'll produce results consistently over time without requiring ongoing effort. This is how high performers live. This is how they produce results that seem impossible to outside observers. They're not superhuman. They automated their behaviors years ago. You can do this too. But you have to commit to the 90 days. You have to push through the formation period. You have to maintain consistency even when it's hard. Because on the other side of those 90 days is automaticity. And automaticity changes everything. Most people won't do this. They'll try for a week or two. Stop. Try something else. They'll stay in perpetual formation, perpetually depleting willpower, perpetually relying on motivation. 5 years from now, they'll be exactly where they are today. But if you do this, if you automate one behavior, then another, 5 years from now you'll have a completely different life. Not because you became a different person, but because you automated the behaviors that produce the life you want. And automation compounds over time. High performers automated their success years ago. Now they're just reaping the results. The question is whether you're willing to do the same. Everything I've told you comes down to one concept: closing the commitment gap. The space between what you say you'll do and what you actually do. The distance between intention and execution. Most people spend their entire lives in that gap. They have goals. They have plans. They have good intentions. But they don't execute. And the gap doesn't close. High performers close the gap. Not because they're more talented or more motivated. Because they built systems that remove the conditions that keep most people stuck. They eliminated decision fatigue by removing unnecessary decisions. They built enforcement mechanisms that make follow-through easier than retreat. They closed their escape hatches so quitting became uncomfortable. They focused on one thing until it was done. They shifted their identity from someone trying to do something to someone who is something. They persisted past the point where most people quit. And they automated their essential behaviors so execution became effortless. This is the blueprint. You don't need more motivation. You need better systems. You don't need more willpower. You need better structure. You don't need to become a different person. You need to close the commitment gap. And here's the truth most people won't accept. You already know what you need to do. You're not confused. You're not lacking information. You're lacking execution. And you're lacking execution because you haven't closed the gap. You haven't removed the conditions that allow you to not follow through. So here's what you do next. Pick one goal. Build a system around it. Remove the decisions. Add enforcement mechanisms. Close the escape hatches. Focus exclusively on that one thing. Declare your identity. Persist past the early phase. Automate the behavior. Do this for 90 days without stopping. Then do it again for the next goal. Do this, and in 1 year, you'll have accomplished more than most people accomplish in 5 years. Not because you worked harder. Because you closed the commitment gap. Because you stopped preparing and started executing. Because you stopped being interested and started being committed. Most people won't do this. They'll nod along. They'll agree with everything. Then they'll go back to their same patterns. They'll keep the gap open. They'll keep leaving decisions unmade, escape hatches available, focus divided. And next year, they'll be in the same place, wondering why they're not making progress. You can't be that person anymore. You've heard the truth. You understand the mechanics. Now you have to decide. Are you going to close the gap, or are you going to keep living in it? High performers closed it years ago, and now they live the life you want. Not because they were chosen, not because they got lucky, because they made one decision, to close the commitment gap, and then they built the systems that enforced it. The question is whether you'll do the same. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next year. Today, right now, make the decision, close the gap, and 12 months from now, you'll look back at this moment as the day everything changed. Not because you became motivated, because you stopped needing motivation. Not because you got inspired, because you built systems. Not because you found your purpose, because you closed the commitment gap. That's what separates people who achieve from people who wish. And now you know exactly how to do it. The rest is execution.